tantalized by safe space and trigger warning culture. The idea that interrogating a new idea is something that gives rise to trauma. This evening, there is a safe space at Michigan University to protect the safety and emotional well-being of students from this dangerous faggot and a lesbian with the wrong opinions. That is insane.
Women unattractive and crazy. Would you rather your child had feminism or cancer?
Some thanks and then some admonishment. Thanks is to the University of Dublin. Unlike a lot of other universities, have been very supportive of College of Welcome bringing me here. University of Maryland, UMD, not so supportive. Cancelled me for security reasons. What happens in a lot of these universities is they inflict last-minute and hugely restrictive charges when anyone wants to bring me to college, implying that there's some kind of security threat from the show. This idea that my words represent a threat to student safety. What they're not telling you, the truth, is that actually you guys and me, we're the only ones at any risk from the incredibly insane progressive lunacy that college administrators breed and indulge on campus. NYU said that the reason that they were cancelling, that the administrators cancelled me, the reason they were cancelling is that my talk was due to happen close to the Islamic Center and the LGBT Center. And that the mere risk of a student encountering me on campus was a peril and a threat. So they couldn't have it. Isn't that amazing? Now, the admonishment I have. What was that time? It's okay, you can speak up. This is a traveling free speech zone. Around me, there is a mile-wide safe space for dissidents, mischief makers, and lovers of free speech. However, I must tell you, I was very upset to learn about some very hurtful and offensive posters going up around. Very upsetting. Most upsetting because someone's using my logo and they didn't license it. That's Bruce. This is Michael Michelle. America's first man. Disgusting hate speech. Disavow. Straight jacket. Oh, it's receipt. That triggers me. All right, let's get started, shall we? We are here to talk about transgender and transsexuals. Happy to be here with you in Delaware. I didn't realize it was actually a state. Going through the tour, the roster, so okay, fine, I've heard of California, that's good, I've heard of Florida. Delaware is just something you see at the bottom of websites, you know? Incorporated in Delaware. I thought it was a small town somewhere. Turns out you do exist. You're just very small. Now we're going to talk about trans tonight. I had the idea for the speech as we travel through North Carolina. There's a lot of uproar about our skirted friends. Bathrooms in North Carolina have turned into a war zone. It's a bit sad, really. They're actually one of the last meritocracies left in America, the bathrooms of North Carolina. At least they used to be. It used to be the case that if you could sort of pass as a woman, if you could sort of get away with it, then you'd be able to use the bathroom. And if you couldn't, people would throw you out. They can come in, it's fine. But now, the federal government is trying to insist that anybody who merely announces that they have a different sex from one they were born into should be able to use all of the resources normally reserved for that sex. In other words, hairy old men in dresses can use cubicles next to 6-year-old girls. Now, it isn't like men or women are keeping vigil searching for trannies. Those that can't make the cut, can't pass as female, which is the vast majority of them, aren't able to hang out with girls. This is a typical transgender individual. Actually, it's one of the more successful ones. He's been to beauty school. More states are now fighting against this law, but North Carolina was the first one to stand up and point out that whatever new clothes the emperor has, mutilating his genitals doesn't make him an empress. As the struggle has come up with other examples of laws that help mere fractions of % of the population while harming everyone else. Unless, of course, you consider the last near decade of Obama's presidency. Or you think about what might happen if Hillary Clinton becomes president. She read out my headlines like they were sort of examples of hatefulness, bigotry, monstrous behavior, but for me it was just kind of like scolded by your gran. Would you rather your child had feminism or cancer? Everyone I know that saw that was like, they just immediately went to Google Peace, you know, and found out that, yes, this misrepresentation, and a lot of this is going on in trans lobbying too, this misrepresentation of humor and mischief and dissidence as bigotry and hatred is something that libertarians and conservatives always had to deal with. So we're going to have the best attempt we can this evening to work out what is going on with this trans thing. You've seen it in magazines, you've been hectored and bullied about it by social justice warriors, you've been told what to think about it by the media. Well, I'm going to tell you that not everything you have heard is what it's cracked up to be. Now, as you may have heard, some horrible history and promotional posters last night made a few people angry. This is one of them. They got really upset about it, to which I could only respond, if you can't cope with words on a poster, how are you going to cope with having your dick chopped off? My position is very simple. There are just 3 genders. There's man, woman, and retarded. This young man is retarded. Of course, many trannies, and those that make up their own new gender, are not actually retarded, but they are deeply mentally challenged, and this is the moment of evening when compassion is called for. They've failed, these people who have a psychiatric disorder. They're failed by the progressive establishment. Is seeking to create political gain out of a medical condition. They want you to take a political position on what ought to be something between a patient and his or her doctor. Consider how fanatical the liberal establishment is, and this is your clue that something's out there. Especially with pronouns. Has anyone here suffered from the scourge of pronoun enforcement? Yes, people here are upset. My pronouns, by the way, are fag, so fag, and his royal fagness. There's a wonderful student at the University of Michigan. Did you hear about this one? So the University of Michigan has changed its admissions procedures so that you have to specify your own gender, your own sex when you sign up. There's just a box. People for whom the 45 options aren't enough. There's a box where you can fill in your own. And somebody wrote in His Majesty. And now this kid has to be referred to by professors as Your Majesty. Or they're committing a hate crime. It's wonderful. In the minds of the far left, what matters is not that a person be free to believe what they want about themselves, or even that the rest of us need the rest of us have the freedom to do what we want. It is that you must comply with the delusions, the politically motivated delusions of progressive left, or else. If the trans lobby had its way, misgendering people would land you in jail. There are already laws hitting the statute books now, in New York, for instance, that can levy gigantic six-figure fines to businesses that misgender their employees or customers. Forcing people to think a certain way in the absence of any medical evidence they should do so is how you know it is a political mission and not a mission of compassion or mercy. It's about making people feel comfortable. Now, a tranny might say to me, "You are ugly." They would be wrong, of course. But they're free to say it. I don't base my self-esteem on the fact that everyone around me is forced to accept whatever I say about myself. Transgender people, in particular the transgender lobby, I don't want anyone to think that I'm going for people who are vulnerable, who are in need, who are damaged. And there are people who are very damaged and need our compassion. And simply for the trans lobby, for the social justice warriors, for the people who get offended on other people's behalf, for the people who want speech codes, who want to clamp down on what you can say and do and think. Those people are the problem. They need to learn to say so what if somebody doesn't accept them. But they never will because they're obsessed with being victims and being given special rights. Everything they don't like is transphobic. They've even invented a swear word for people like us. Cis. Cisgendered scum, they sometimes say. This is an example of their hypocrisy. They're asking us to warp the language, to make reality conform to their delusions. And inventing new swear words for groups that aren't like them. It is hypocrisy of the highest order. And if you won't sleep with one of them, they call it transphobic. It's called the cotton ceiling. Did you know that? You know, it's true. There's like the glass ceiling when women can't get ahead. I'm going to install an actual glass ceiling in my house, which women can't go. Where the bedrooms and the good shit is. But if you don't want to sleep with a transgender person, if the idea of a chick with a dick is a bit much for your tastes, you'll be called bigot. And they call it the cotton ceiling. It's sort of after underwear, because you don't want to go through. I think it's true. They should just call it biology. My constant refrain is that we should not tailor our cultural norms to the whims of the mentally ill. We do not require Americans to speak French to mental patients who believe they are Napoleon Bonaparte. We also don't change that person's birth certificate to say they were born in France, centuries ago. There's a mental illness in Israel, by the way, called Jerusalem syndrome, in which foreigners spontaneously believe they're religious figures from the Bible. Imagine if society had to conform to their literacy. You not only have to speak Aramaic or some other kind of dead language to them, you have to accept their faith. If you're an atheist and someone identifies as Jesus, will you risk disbelieving them and being labelled a bigot? Now, this isn't to say that I don't have some sympathy with trans folk, as I'm obliged to call them. I'm not remotely the most defensive person on this subject. There are people who say far worse things on the internet than I do. He's a very naughty boy. People with a real disorder, not trans-trenders in the media, which is what this is referring to. Gay people who want a bit of attention, who go around wearing ridiculous clothes. I hate people like that. I want you to imagine, though, the struggles of a fellow student who believes that he or she was born in the wrong body. They were born in the wrong shape. And when they look in the mirror, they see something alien. It doesn't feel like them. Now, this student will go to any lengths to become the person they know they are on the inside. It may involve drug use, mutilation of their bodies, or starvation. I'm not describing a transgender person, I'm describing somebody with anorexia nervosa. Anorexia nervosa is a mental disorder. When detected, subject gets counselling, and sometimes drugs, other mental health treatment, to stop their destructive behaviours, to encourage them to recover mentally and physically, and learn to cope with the condition they have. Sufferers with anorexia end up very often leading perfectly healthy, happy lives. And they even maintain a healthy body weight in many cases. Now imagine if anorexia was on the LGBT spectrum. LGBTQRI''A'', whatever they call it. I hate my own people so much. Imagine they put another A on the end. You'd be encouraged to tell these people to starve themselves. You'd be encouraged to tell them that whatever happens, whatever they do, however they abuse themselves, that it's okay. That they're just being them, that they're finding out who they are. Overeaters would be praised. Undereaters would be praised. They might even get surgery to remove some ribs so they could be even thinner. That's what would happen if we treated one disorder like we treat this disorder. It's sick and it's disgusting, but that largely describes how gender dysphoria is treated. The DSM-5 is a manual, anyone here knows about it. It's a diagnostic manual, which diagnostic criteria for mental illnesses. It's used to diagnose mental disorders. It's bound to the pressure of the trans lobby and the progressive establishment, which insists that trannies are healthy and legitimate. Their 2013 edition made the change from disorder, gender identity disorder, to condition, gender dysphoria. Some are still brave enough to tell the truth. Sir Paul Hughes, the former psychiatrist and chief at Johns Hopkins, they pioneered this surgery, the transition surgery. Says that he won't do it anyway, because he recognizes that sex changes are biologically impossible. And the people who promote sexual reassignment surgery are collaborating with and promoting mental disorder. But Hugh and his colleagues did the first transgender surgeries, and they know that it just doesn't work. The suicide rates, all the studies say the same thing actually. The suicide rates don't improve, in many cases get far worse. Depression rates don't improve, in many cases get far worse. Transgender people can never be women. Or men, for the small slice of women who are idiotic enough to give up their female privilege. Trannies, oh, it's true. It's true. Does anybody in here buy this male privilege malarkey? Good grief. You've heard me talk about this on other occasions, but it's ridiculous. Now, transgender people suffer from astronomically high suicide rates after having their genitals mutilated. Some theorize that the reason for this is they realize they weren't magically transformed into women by hacking off parts of their body. Regardless of the reason, this treatment continues, and it continues for largely political reasons. I was sort of upset about Time magazine putting Laverne Cox on the cover, as many people were with Vanity Fair for putting Bruce Jenner on the cover. Because when you do that, you're not saying, look at this person. You're saying, be like this person. You're setting up a psychiatric disorder as an aspirational lifestyle choice. And the reason that I'm me sometimes, and I make nasty jokes, and I've made some, I'm about to make some more, is that arguing kindly and sweetly and from facts doesn't seem to work with these people. They are intent on taking a phrase that was more properly applied to the black civil rights struggle, civil rights, and applying it to people who have a disease. And they're doing this for politics. They're doing this to get in. They're doing this for a variety of reasons that aren't justified by medical science. And promoting these weird genderqueer lifestyles in the media is another way of breaking down traditional sex roles. Another way of attacking traditional family values. Another way of eroding conservative America. And it's about politics, not medicine. One study in Sweden, by the way, for 30 years, found that suicide rates of post-op trannies was 20 times higher than the normal population. After they had it done, they're 20 times more likely to kill themselves than you or me. That's the definition of medical malpractice. Putting somebody through something that makes their life worse, that makes them more likely to die. The Williams Institute at UCLA also found unbelievably high suicide attempt rates. More than 40% of trannies attempt suicide, as compared to less than 5% of the general population. There's
There's a long list of health problems associated with them. Research at Vanderbilt has shown that they are more likely to develop blood pressure problems thanks to hormone therapy, cancer involvement, drug abuse, anxiety, depression, heart disease, all sorts of things. These are terribly broken people that need our help. They're some of the most damaged among us, besides my ex-boyfriends. And they need therapy and treatment, and to learn to live with the gender they are. This is Victorian electroshock therapy. It's what we used to do to people with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder as well now. It's my view, and this is a view that you will not read in the media, which you will hear from some doctors. We're going to look back on what we allow these people to do to themselves. We're going to look back and wonder how we could ever have been so barbarically cruel. It's not very often you hear somebody from the LGBT community speaking ill of another group in that acronym. But really what I'm trying to avoid is this. I'm trying to avoid in 2030 or 2040, when we look back on the current year, and we think about what we did to these people, and it looks a lot like that. I think it's going to rank up there with some of the worst treatments meted out to people who need help. Now, at some point, children of both genders are going to read about doctors who treated mental illness by surgically building a vagina out of their penis. The vagina has to be blocked open every 6 months. Actually, you know what, space with the gory details, but this is a really horrible thing they go through. These people are vulnerable and at risk, and they're being treated not compassionately, not by doctors who wish to help them come to terms with what's wrong with them, help them come to terms with the sex they're actually into. Instead, they want to indulge delusion. Instead, they want to walk reality around fantasy. This is a very dangerous thing. And it's where the pronoun stuff comes from. It is the indulgence of lunacy and fantasy. And it ultimately affects all of us. Now, I wish these adults were the people who suffer the most from this, but of course they're not. They're not the most at risk. You can laugh, it's okay. But now stop laughing, because this is in Canada. Actually, you can laugh again in Canada. In Canada, it's sort of trendy to have trans kids. So my view, this is a kind of sort of profoundly homophobic thing to do. You know, you've got a kid who, a young boy likes to play with action men together or something, likes to wear dresses, and rather than, you know, perhaps being homosexual, it's not ideal, but not as bad as this. Parents are now encouraged to be comforted. You did nothing wrong. You didn't parent wrong, raise queer. Your child has a disease, and we're going to fix it for you. We're going to deliver it back to you as a girl. This not only gets parents out of having to self-examine what they might have done wrong to lead their child gay, but it also raises the specter of these young kids thrown on hormone therapy before they even reach puberty, before their frontal lobes are formed, before they know who or what they are, what they may be attracted to later in their life. This is really terrifying stuff. Monstrous, actually. And the majority of the American media is behind it. The New York Times does this. Mike, Vox, Gawker, BuzzFeed. They're all behind this stuff. They're all complicit in this. Children have no idea what their sexuality might be until puberty. Even the mental health establishment will grudgingly admit that non-gender conforming children may snap out of it by their teenage years. All the research shows that if you leave these kids alone, they grow up perfectly well-adjusted, straight or gay people. And they ask for the surgery to be reversed. Imagine the hell they're going to endure. And remind yourself that this is a consequence, possibly the most sick and deplorable and depraved consequence of social justice and the far progressive left in their quest to reimagine society. This is the primary consequence, and the most extreme one. Young children being brutalized. They may have heard of a particular mental illness called Munchausen's by proxy. In this mental illness, the caregiver will fabricate, exaggerate, or directly cause illnesses in their child or another dependent so they feel special and act as a caregiver. I think there's a direct parallel with these trans parents. We call it tranny by proxy. They feel special, they feel like they're part of the cultural movement. They feel like they're playing around with the gender identity of their child in a way that is not harmful. But this is why the founder of the site I work for, Andrew Breitbart, used to say that politics is downstream from culture. You can persuade people to change political positions, but the culture, is what forms their most deep-seated and atavistic opinions, desires, and preferences, bigotries too. And when our culture, whether it's Netflix, Amazon Prime, or the series that they commission now, legitimizing and glamorizing of mental illness. That's culture. And that is encouraging us to normalize something that nobody should desire and nobody should celebrate. We've been discussing trannies. There are also plenty of retards out there as well. And the retards aren't... It's a little bit... There are plenty of narcissistic young people who take advantage of this new crusade by the progressive left in order to get attention. And it's what that tweet earlier was directed at. Trans are just queers who wear makeup, or whatever it was, bags and makeup. And these people, the so-called transgenders, are the ones you'll see like Jaden Smith, you know? Those dumb little men in dresses. Well, and this is not really a dress, it's more of a... I don't... These are deeply narcissistic people, and they're helping to contribute to a culture that normalizes dangerous and unhelpful messages sent to young people. Now, nobody has a problem with artistic intervention. David Bowie and androgyny in the 70s was precedent. But this is a political mission. It's not an artistic statement. And it's a political mission designed to reinforce a very destructive and unhealthy political ideology masquerading as medical compassion and sympathy. I hate to break it to you, but if you identify as any one of the following genders, you are closer to a potato than a regular college child. These are some of the gender identities that you are encouraged to explore these days by the progressive left. But, sorry, I'm very, very beloved by the military, and I didn't want to show any disrespect to the armed forces by including attack helicopter. These are some of the things. Just look at them. Agender version 1, agender version 2, agender version gender void, demigender with third gender, demi-agender with third gender, femme, butch, travesty, NB, and aliagender. Well, it's funny to say that. It's funny to say that because young people are encouraged to catch them all. Smarter than even you realise. More brilliant than even you realise. That's my next fucking slide. Stealing my joke. These are small genders from the Runway Success Pokemon Go. I beg you, teenagers, college students, breakout Vine stars, find another way to be special. This isn't it. We're constantly told that we're taking advantage of people with mental disorders, or I use words like retarded, that it is offensive to the mentally challenged community. What could be worse than mainstreaming this trans-trending craze where you're encouraged to indulge every bizarre, lunatic, insane gender identity? What could be more disrespectful to genuine sufferers of this condition? Nobody ever accused the progressive left of consistency. I encourage you to find different ways to be special, please. Do anything except to create a new gender. I don't even mind if you become vegan. Like bicycles. You could even vote Democrat if you want. Now imagine during this talk, there probably in the room have been 1 to 2 new genders invented. I've talked about... This does affect the rest of us, you know. It does affect, I know that a lot of people say, well, okay, why not just leave them alone? Who cares? But it does affect the rest of us. There's more than 99%, the cisgender among us. Because we have thought control being shoved down our throats under the guise of sensitivity. There are pronoun police on campuses as part of these Orwellian-sounding bias departments. You have one of those? Bias task force, designed to scour exam papers for heteropatriarchal misogyny. I mean, it's not very far from the day when you're going to be presented with an extract from Dickens, and it'll say, "They were the best of times, they were the worst of zero times," and have these things retroactive. You say they want to rewrite history in many cases. They want to tear down statues of people because they might have been slave ones. They want to rewrite history. Have you seen Bruce Jenner's Wikipedia page? He won the men's 200, no sorry, it says she won the men's 200 meters. The whole thing is logical garbage, and it's designed to pander to the feelings of the trans lobby who are advocating for a group that ought really to be given space, time, and quietude rather than being forced into the public spotlight. And to pander, of course, to the transgenders too, the people who think this stuff is cool. Women's sport is suffering. Have you heard of these female MMA fighters? You know, who are getting their jaws broken by coming again. These female MMA fighters are having their jaws broken by trans women who insist on being allowed to participate in women's boxing, and of course advocate for body strength of the men they are. This stuff is hurting the rest of us. Women seem to think it's acceptable because they hate to hurt anyone's feelings by pointing out the whole point of women's boxing is to box other women. Trannies have made feminism worse by insisting that they be treated as women and branding those that don't accept them as TERFs, trans-exclusionary radical feminists. I'm proud to be a trans-exclusionary radical feminist. I suppose beating up on feminists is the one thing they do get right. Even a mutilated clock is right twice a day. Trans is being pushed on us as a cultural norm by the media. Caitlin, Lavoon Cox, Hari Neff.
Leslie Jones!
What they're basically saying is that men are so much better at everything than women, that we're even better at being women than they are. She won Glamour magazine's Woman of the Year. It's ridiculous. You can't say this because you'll be branded a transphobe. I don't know what's next. Schizophrenia phobe? Bipolar phobe? Pedophobe? Of course, if you read Salon, anyone here read Salon? No. That was the appropriate response. They publish headlines like, "I'm a paedophile, but I'm not a monster." It gives you an insight. It's fucked up. It's fucked up. It gives you an insight into the sick psychology of the progressive left and where they may be going next. I've got a theory, actually, that after transgender is going to be paedophilia next. This is not without precedent. In the 70s in the UK, the Paedophile Information Exchange, which was a feminist group whose acronym appropriately was PI, they make it so easy. Was working with people who were still MPs in Parliament, who were seeking to rehabilitate the reputation of people who fuck children. This is what Salon is doing. They have a particular guy they keep publishing about and copy from, attempting to suggest that although he is attracted to prepubescent children, because he's never acted on it, he's not a monster and is deserving of your sympathy. So you see, it's sort of a mental condition that makes them victims when it suits them. And it is a brave expression of gender identity or a civil rights frontier when it doesn't. This is sick stuff. It's disgusting. And it is part of the mission of the progressive left to uproot everything we think we know about society, about each other. This is the modern progressive left in action. Caitlyn Jenner is normal now because the media, globalists, and cultural elites told us so. They're teaching children that trannies are sane and normal. They They treat university students like kindergartners, so everything being pushed on you about gender and sexuality is being punished on the little kids as well. The left is insisting that we take a political position on a medical disorder. That is sick and illogical and wrong. Some people have read about a case where a trans man was barred from leading a breastfeeding group of new mothers. Can you imagine? Well, so this guy wanted to go and of course, unable to expectorate, not capable of producing milk, but nonetheless wants to lead a breastfeeding group. It's such attention seekers, apart from anything else. Well, the Canadian media said that the women were at fault for being discriminatory. Young first-time mothers quite rightly had no interest in a man with a goatee and breasts, telling them how to breastfeed their newborn babies, but they were called bigots by the Canadian media. It's very simple. Treat the mentally ill. Don't indulge them and make the entire culture and everybody else suffer in the process. There's a helplessness we all feel when we encounter the media and government teaming up to push an idea like aspirational transsexualism. I call it aspirational transsexualism. But a few things we can do. Fight back legally. Besides North Carolina's normal bathrooms, many states are ganging up to fight feds on this issue. Hopefully more do. Hopefully they're successful. Fight the virtue signalers financially. The right is learning how to effectively boycott. We saw this in the Gamergate controversy, where people who were unhappy with feminist retards claiming that video games contribute to an atmosphere of negative They had to go at the religious right. The religious right, rather, had to go video games in the 90s for saying that Grand Theft Auto could make you go and shoot up a school. Well, it was bollocks then. And bollocks now, the left does it too. Video games don't make you sexist. In fact, some of the research shows that they may even help get out of your system. Rape the prostitute in Grand Theft Auto. And you're less likely to do it in real life. Just kidding. But there is some evidence to suggest that competitive sports games like FIFA are good for men because they raise testosterone and they increase the competitive instinct. And they're also good because they help to let off steam. So there's some evidence that people are nicer to each other when they play these kind of video games. No evidence whatsoever they can make you sexist, of course. Anyway, the right is learning to boycott and reject the excesses and lies of the progressive left. Target stopped to quite a tumble after their foolhardy trans bathroom policy. It turns out, amazingly, that parents don't want bearded men in dresses and bad wigs taking a shit next to their 6-year-old daughters. Who could have imagined? My chief of staff actually stopped shopping at Target. I didn't ask them to. They said, you know what, I just don't want to go there anymore. It's not that I'm taking my daughters or not taking my daughters, I just don't want to frequent it anymore. And their stock really took a hammer. It just goes to show conservatives have been used to losing on social issues for a really long time. You can win. You can beat them. We beat them on video games, and we can beat them on this too. And not only, video games, are there any victims there? Who knows? It's not nice to have video games gerrymandered. Will they say, we just want, to everyone to be included. The result is that things get bought from the shelves and stores. But are there any real great victims there? Well, not like these. Not like young transgender people who are pushed into the wrong treatment pathway. There's no evidence that's the best thing for them. Not like this. We can help people by pushing back against this. You can support those leading the charge. Many of us get by boycotts and why they might work and get sort of consumer activism, and that's all great. Conservatives are starting to win that stuff now. The state of North Carolina has led the charge, but it's feeling heat. The NCAA basketball tournament isn't going to be there. Pulled out North Carolina. There are also others actually, but there's these bands that won't play in North Carolina now. They're perfectly happy to play for money in Russia. They will play in Moscow, but they won't play in North Carolina. It's hypocrisy of the highest order. You should not allow it to bully you into submission. Expose the absurdity of this stuff. Clever ridicule is always the most effective way to combat absurdity. At the University of Michigan, that guy who's just demanding that he's be referred to as His Majesty is doing something important. Humor and comedy does something really important. And you should be angry with comedians like Rock and Seinfeld for their cowardice in refusing to play student audiences anymore because students are too easily triggered by jokes about race or sexuality. Comedians are the people who are supposed to push the boundaries. They're supposed to go there when nobody else can. They're like drag queens in that way. They can push the boundaries of what can be thought and said. Drag queens are wonderful, I love drag queens. They can push the boundaries of what can be thought and said, but they're bottling it. chickening out because they realize they created a monster by pandering to the progressive left. And now the students who were formerly their fans give them a hard time. But humor and comedy, if your leaders, if your favorite comedians, if your favorite actors, if your favorite politicians, if journalists aren't going to do it for yourselves. And this is the Pepe generation, actually. The great grave was called Pepe, since the Southern Poverty Law Center has declared it a real cause of racial tension in this country. Nothing to do with bad schools or chronic, long-term underfunding, or police whose hands are tied, or endless democratic administration of black neighborhoods. No, the real cause of racial tension in this country is a green cartoon frog. Thank you, the progressive left, to CNN for telling us this. You're very brave to still be applauding. But one thing I've noticed in the conservative movement is that young people are starting to take this stuff on themselves. They're starting to do it for themselves because their cultural leaders won't. You should be proud of yourself for that. And lastly, it's time for the LGBT community. If there are any of you here, I doubt they're going to interrupt my talks. But hey, hi, sweetheart. Good gays. Good gays are very rare. Good gays are very, very rare. By and large, fags are awful.
Bisexual.
Oh, you're right. Well. You mean greedy?
I haven't got preference.
I don't think what the research says is that women are sort of born much more bisexual and sort of life influences can push them one way or the other. Lucky for you, that means not only are they happy to get down for some hot lesbo action in your favourite movies, but they'll also still fuck you afterwards. But men's sexuality tends to be more fixed, and life influences have less of an impact. But there are rare male bisexuals, so welcome and thank you for coming. I'll leave you with one thing before we go to questions, and that is you should never feel bad about mocking any of these groups. Progressive left likes to say I'm cruel, vindictive, spiteful, mean, and a monster, and that's why I attack trans. Well, they're partly right. I am cruel, vindictive, spiteful, mean, and a monster, but that's not why. It's not why I like to make jokes about transgender people. I do it because comedy and humor is one of the most powerful and effective weapons that we have. In the face of an insane, politically homogenous, globalist, media-influenced world, comedy, humor, and irreverence are some of the few things that we have left at our disposal, and they're enormously effective, hugely effective. And remember that the target of your satire, comedy, and mischief isn't people who are suffering. It is the progressive left. The people you want to trigger aren't people sitting at home with a condition that they desperately want help with. The people that you're looking to trigger are the political lobbies, are the activists, are the social justice warriors, the idiots in safe spaces. There's a safe space here tonight, by the way, on campus. Do you know that? Yeah, don't know, fucking dangerous idiots. The people that you're mocking are the people who are trying to enforce group theory, who are limiting the boundaries of expression and also the boundaries of scientific inquiry. I mean, there are studies about transgenderism that aren't getting funded that ought to be. Stuff that we don't know about this disease, that we don't know about this disorder, that we ought to know, that can't be done for political reasons. That's so cruel. That's so mean. That's the real vindictiveness. Is not caring about the suffering of people with a condition because you want to enforce a political ideology. That's bonkers. So never feel bad about making jokes about any minority groups. But in particular this one, because this one needs your help. And the people who claim the loudest to be supporting them the most are actually people doing the most damage. And the principles that will help are the principles that conservatives and libertarians have always known yield the best results. Reason, truth, logic, consistency, and a good sense of humor. Thank you very much. something somewhere. Do you want to just do hands? All right, let's just do. Is there a little thing going on? There is. Okay, lady in the red jacket is very enthusiastic. Very nice red jacket. Yeah, well, you failed. Yes.
You'd be seeking legal compensation because it is kind of a violation of our educational contracts that we have with our universities.
Right. Well, the question that you missed at the beginning was, I sometimes suggest the strategies that conservative and libertarians can use to assert their rights and to protect themselves. Should you be taking legal remedies? Well, in certain circumstances, yes, of course. If you're at a public university, and I would like for those of you in here, also people watching at home, to take note of this. I'm going to putting you on notice. If you are at a public university and you wish to bring a speaker who, comes in ridiculous clothes and cracks bad jokes, but provides us a perspective that you might not hear otherwise on campus, and you think it would be cool to hear it out, meet other people that you didn't know on campus that maybe have some similar opinions to you, you could hang out with, because let's face it, conservatives can sometimes be hard to find in American college campuses. And the university, or the administration, attempts to shut you down, or imposes bogus security restrictions, or insists, as one university in Washington, D.C. has done this month, on last-minute time and venue changes just to fuck with people. You should absolutely consider legal remedies. And there are all sorts of things that you can do. Fire.org is an excellent organization that advocates for student rights, free speech in particular. They're not politically partisan, but of course the majority of the time they're defending libertarians and conservatives, because it's libertarians and conservatives having their speakers shut down, having obstructions placed on their rights to invite whoever they want to speak. But also private universities too. Private universities, you are the customers. They serve you, not the other way around. You are here to get a decent education, a well-rounded education. If they refuse to provide that for you in class, if they refuse to give you the full gamut of opinions and expose you to different points of view, and instead make this a place of insulation and safe spaces for the bigoted progressive left, then you have every right to use every remedy at your disposal to force them to provide the education that you are paying them for. So absolutely yes. And later in the tour, I'll be, on the course of the tour, I've been releasing various resources for people. One of them was a pack where you can request your own data from Twitter. I'll be releasing later in the tour a sort of basic toolkit for students to approach their colleges, stuff that Fire.org wouldn't necessarily cover, it's slightly outside their remit, that will help you if you find yourself discriminated against by your teachers, marked down by conservative points of view. Or if you find events very difficult to stay, if the university is playing dirty tricks with you at the last minute, trying to get yourself shut down. The piece of advice I can give you is this. Colleges are scared of three things. One is bad press and bad reputations, because these days there's a lot of money involved in the higher education ecosystem, and they're all competing with each other for funding, for students, and for best researchers and professors. So they're terrified of bad press. They are terrified of lawsuits because they are driven entirely by money. The people who run universities these days, it used to be the case that the faculty were the gods and the administration served the faculty. These days it's the administration who runs these places. The administration is solely dedicated to making money. And the third thing is it's really all the same point, but the third thing is their alumni networks, which they're fiercely protective of. University of Maryland stung the students that I was supposed to speak to on Wednesday night with a $6,500 security fee 4 days from the event. Well, my response to that is very simple. We will hold an event at the University of Maryland come hell or high water, because they are a public institution. In addition to that, I will make my entire talk 1 hour and a half dedicated to the destruction of free speech at the University of Maryland campus, and we will send copies of that video to everybody in every alumni network we can find at the University of Maryland. We will send every piece of coverage we do. We will shine a light on the administrators in my talk with their names, their photos, their phone numbers, and their email addresses of every administrator. against bureaucracies and administrations that hold your educational future in their hands. They have a massive Damoclesian sword over your head, because at any point they could expel you and ruin your life. Well, they can't get me. They've got nothing on me, so I intend to continue to advocate for your rights, and the University of Maryland better know that I am coming for them. Thank you. Yeah.
So obviously one of the most important issues in this upcoming election is Islamic migration to Western countries. But what do you think are some of the reasons that Western countries are sort of obligated to take in these immigrants and sort of give them everything that they desire and treat them like citizens when in reality that they're not?
I think I've worked out why the progressive left likes Islam so much. It isn't just that feminism and Islam have sort of formed this kind of unholy alliance. They want a world that actually doesn't look that dissimilar. You know, they want to break apart the sexes. They both think men are toxic and dangerous, so women have to be covered up and kept away. They're both authoritarian regimes. They're both intolerant. They're both comfy if you don't agree with them. They're both incredibly thin-skinned. All sorts of reasons why feminism and Islam are very similar. There used to be useful idiots, the progressive left in this country, were called useful idiots by the Soviets because they were sort of helping to undermine the values that made America free and strong and great. Well, the progressive left wants to do the same thing. I mean, look at the behavior. I mean, Obama is trying to sneak 12,500 Syrian immigrants into this country while he thinks nobody's looking because everybody is focused on the election. What they want to do is radically reshape the culture of this country. They want to undermine all the things that make it wonderful. They want to undermine free speech, free expression, the First and Second Amendments. They want to undermine property rights and capitalism. They don't believe in any of those things. What they don't realize, because they're fucking stupid, is that those things are what made this country the nicest, kindest nation on earth. They're what made this the best possible place to be born a woman, or to be born black, or to be born gay, or to be born even transgender. This is the best country in the world you would possibly hope for if you have one of those identities. And the reason is capitalism. The reason is freedom. The reason is democracy and property rights. The reason is all of the values on which this country was founded. Freedom of expression and the right to defend that freedom of expression. That's what made America the kindest, most compassionate and best country in the world for everyone. Because it's a country based on values, not on race or geography. The left in this country, and that includes Obama and Hillary, want to change that. And one of the reasons they want to change it is that the people who they bring in tend to vote for them because they give them free shit. So it isn't so much that they really believe that these immigrants have some sort of God-given right to come into America and throw themselves on welfare for 4 generations. They don't care about that so much as beating the Republicans in the next election. And of course, if you offer people free shit, they tend to repay your generosity at the ballot box. But to give you an insight into how cruel and sick and morally deficient this really is, it is the progressive left that since slavery has been largely responsible for keeping the black community in this country in ruins. By the ridiculous war on drugs, Bill Clinton's crime bill, Republicans are not completely immune from this, I have to say. But the progressive left, tearing black dads away from the family that happened under the last Clinton administration, throwing people in prison, and replacing black dads with the state, is the single biggest thing that has kept black communities in chaos and in ruins. Patronizing black people, pandering to black people, and giving them ready-made excuses, encouraging them to indulge in movements and victimhood, instead of participating in society and joining in the American dream. They don't want good schools in black areas because they want black people to be dependent. They live a Democrat. I want the best schools in the country to be black areas, so that if black kids are smart enough, they can get to Harvard. They can get to Harvard fairly on their own merits. But the left, doesn't have the sort of logical consistency that people like us do. They want the votes, and they want to change America because they don't like the values on which this country was founded. So it isn't so much that they think that these people deserve to come in, take your money, and to live off you for free. Clearly they could never sell that. That's too ridiculous even for the left. But they do think, and they're right, that mass immigration to this country will permanently change the fabric of society here. And they're succeeding. They're succeeding. The amnesty, if amnesty passes for the 11 million illegal immigrants here, the Republicans will never win another election. That's why that along with the Supreme Court, is why this election matters so much. Because if Hillary gives amnesty to all the illegals who are here, the Republicans will never win another election. This country is over, as you know. Simply be gone. Thank you.
I think that they've been chosen for me. I want to choose. I want to choose this guy. Yes.
Do you think the Republican Party is coming around to accepting gays more, thanks to you and Peter Thiel?
Under Trump, yeah. Trump is clearly the most pro-gay candidate in American electoral history. Hillary Clinton was against gay marriage until it became impossible for her to hold on to that position. And she flipped on it because she wants to pander to homosexuals while taking tens of millions of dollars from Saudi Arabia, which murders us. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has always been nice about gays, and he's a New Yorker. It's tough to be a homophobe in New York. I mean, you really can't get away with hating gays in New York. They just don't survive there. Donald Trump is clearly, certainly for the Republicans, and I think probably for every other party, the most pro-gay candidate in American electoral history. The fact that he's embraced Peter Thiel, the fact that Trump has specifically mentioned the threat to gays posed by radical Islam, and what Trump would actually do. As a gay man, I'm perfectly relaxed and perfectly comfortable with a ban on Muslim immigration. Some people find that outrageous, but I don't. I think what Trump would actually do for gays, rather than anything anybody really has said, what he would actually do for homosexuals makes him by far and away the most pro-gay candidate in American electoral history. And I think the Republican Party must realize now that they are splitting into the never-Trumpers, the old-fashioned religious right, free market fundamentalists, the National Review types and all the rest of it, who simply speak to people 70 and above and no one else. And the rest of us, the rest of you, I should say, the younger people who don't care so much about this sort of stultifying social correctness and who just want everyone to get on with their lives and be left alone. I think that what the media inevitably addresses because it doesn't suit them, because it doesn't fit the narrative, is that you talk to Trump voters, and I try to do this as often as I can, and ask them about this. I've never found a Trump voter I would classify as homophobic. I've never spoken to one. And I think it's because he has energized something in the Republican base that was always there, but the Republicans, I think, were getting a rap because the Republican establishment was basically homophobic. What the Republican Party has done for so long is it's drifted so far from its own base that it really had no idea what Americans believed in. And that's good news, because it means that under Trump or whatever follows Trump, and the Republican Party will never be the same again now. Whatever happens this election, I think the Republican Party has a reasonable claim, given its firmness on Islam, to be far more pro-gay than the Democrats. And I think they're right about that. And certainly the last election in the UK, half of gay men said they were going to vote for the Conservatives. Because gays now have everything they want. When you have everything you want, you don't have to play the victim and you don't have to do the special pleading anymore. You start looking around you start being a bit more logical when you get out of the victim grievance mindset. This sort of, well, owes me something, I'm oppressed. When you snap out of that and you realize that you are responsible for what happens in your life, and that you are responsible for whether you succeed or fail, people tend to end up conservative or libertarian. Yes. This is a very enthusiastic hand. You have to be high energy to see your own see you.
How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
I just graduated from Rutgers, and the one thing I will say I took away was learning about you. One of the girls who smeared paint all over her face was actually in my class.
Rutgers?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun. I won't say anything, thank you. It's okay. But the thing is, she's actually, when I spoke to her, she's actually a normal girl. So this leads into my question. What can we do as Republicans, Libertarians, conservative movement to just mainstream our ideas? Because things like ESPN, which is basically MSNBC with a football, NTV, Vox, all these things. How do we fight
The idea that sports fans want to hear, discussions about white privilege. Who came up with this? The ESPN is only the thing that people watch the most grudgingly in all of America. It's like, okay, well, nobody else is carrying the game, so I've just got to listen to this garbage.
If I see one more Colin Kaepernick thing, I'm going to freak out.
Well, I think that the reason that the left is so terrified by Pepe, the reason the left is so terrified by Pepe is it represents a sort of popular uprising from the libertarian and conservative base in this country. We don't really need them anymore. We don't need them to be the funny ones. We can be funny now. We're leading culture, where previously the left was to lead culture by the nose. It would force us to engage with these utterly unattractive and untalented people, Lena Dunham,
Amy Schumer, Hari Nef. These people who have literally nothing of any interest whatsoever about them, but we're sort of compelled to like. Amy Schumer is put on the cover of a magazine, and it's sort of, I dare you to call me unattractive. That's the message you're getting. You know, I dare you to say what I am, which is a talentless fat dyke. The left got so used to winning the culture wars, now they see something much more exciting and intelligent and funny, something much more vibrant and interesting than them sort of bubbling up. They have to snap it out. They have to give it a name and say, oh, let's do some white supremacist nonsense. You know, this is bigotry, misandry, homophobia, whatever. You know, they have to give it a name and put it in a box. Well, it can't be contained because Pepe is the result of 30 years of stultifying political correctness and political homogeny from the progressive left. And it's interesting, your conservative celebrities have been too cowardly to come out and express their politics. Your politicians have been too fucking useless to fight the culture war. Your conservative professors, similarly, too cowardly to fight these battles. So people are kind of taking it on themselves, and I find that enormously encouraging because it shows that there is a large, enthusiastic base of conservatives who are happy to fight culture wars as well as political ones. And it's culture wars where you win back civilization. I think the way to win, the way to spread, the way to mainstream your stuff is to be what you already are. Talented, funny, clever. Nobody can resist the truth wrapped in a good joke. So, you know, come at them with ridicule. They hate it. They hate being laughed at more than anything else. They cannot handle you laughing at them. So do it every day. Every day. That makes sense. So when you hear that immortal expression, I find that really offensive. There is only one proper response. Tell a joke twice as bad immediately. The only thing you can do, because otherwise it will never ever end. And it is my firm belief, you know, I'm really just a sort of Falstaffian kind of jester type, but it's my firm belief that through humour and mockery and satire, that's sometimes the most effective and the best way to reveal great truths about ourselves, because you can get away with saying things we might not be able to otherwise. You can get away with dropping hate facts and truth bombs that people might not take if you were to do it with a straight face. And I think humour is the way to win. And I think if you continue to be creative and funny and create good things, they can't really fight you, because what the left has at the moment is a complete dearth of talent. Left-wing celebrities, Amy, Lena, left-wing politicians, Hillary Clinton, or, you know, the list goes on and on and on. What do all these people have in common? A total lack of talent. Look at the right by comparison. We've had our differences, but Shapiro, hugely smart, very brilliant. There's me, there's Ann Coulter, there's Dinesh D'Souza. These are people with real great intellects. And they're funny. And they can't, but the left can't beat them. The left hates them. So celebrate those people and do what you can to be like it yourself. Spirit is great. Yes.
So earlier you had said that the transphobic mentality that the media is, you know, pushing on us, you think might later lead down to pedophobe mentality and fear of that. So I'm asking what do you think, or do you think that the earlier homophobic mentality that they had, you know, pushed on everybody, and the legalization of gay marriage, and now that battle is kind of won, that they're going to push for this transphobic and then eventually pedophobic, and then if so, where do you draw the line?
Well, they might not have been entirely wrong about gays. I mean, should it be an aspirational lifestyle choice? Should being gay be something people look up to? Because it seems to be imbued with this sort of moral rectitude, as though being a fag was something to aim for. Well, it doesn't seem it to me. It doesn't seem it to me at all. I'm acutely aware, nobody else really has ever expressed it like this, but it is something that that has always occurred to me, and I'll get serious with you for a second. Without getting into the realms of too much information. It's always struck me, you know, as self-evidently obvious that if you could be straight, you would be. I can't create a child with the person that I love, for instance, no matter where I put it. And sooner or later, there's the courtesy of life. And you think, well, you know, okay, fine, well, we don't have any homophobia, it's perfectly fine being gay, and endlessly handed to a mollycoddle, like it's sort of ridiculous on stage 3 nights a week. And everything's wonderful. But if I want a child, I have to do it some weird way. It doesn't seem to me like that's something to aspire to. Like that is some kind of obvious moral superiority to let everything wants you to believe. That's weird, very weird. As a gay person, I like to indulge in the fact that I can push the boundaries, push the limits of what can be said. I get a license to, you know, to say things, to say words other people can't. I can put a fag on a bus and, you know, 6 foot letters and I can do all sorts of things that you people can't do. This talk, for instance. But it's a sort of responsibility that, you know, and a freedom that comes at a great, great cost. So maybe they're wrong about gays. It's not so much for me where we draw the line now as whether the line should have already been drawn a very long time ago. It seems perfectly obvious to me, and this, by the way, is what science says, even if the gay lobby denies it, that growing up homosexual is a mixture of nature and nurture. Now, for me, I think I probably always knew, and probably couldn't do very much about it. But I do remember an element of choice involved. And if there is an element of choice involved, shouldn't we be encouraging people into happy, healthy, heterosexual relationships?